A doctor saves a woman's life, and he is hailed by the community as a hero. A woman brought her to the hospital having found her bleeding in the streets, and she is called the Good Samaritan of the story. But in-laws knew her husband was violent and encouraged her not to make him mad. The pastor knew she was being beaten by her husband, and together they prayed that he would get better. Neighbors heard the shouting from their house, but didn't want to get involved. Friends of their children saw their bruises too, but were afraid they would get their friends in trouble if they said something. We hear a story of a hero and a good Samaritan, but why were their heroics necessary? A young man turns his life around, giving up drugs and alcohol, and becomes a favorite teacher in the community. A treatment center is credited for saving him, showing the power of community and perseverance. But when the young man was younger, his parents decided they didn't have money to get him counseling, despite all the bullying. Friends never reached out when he became more distant because they didn't want to be intrusive. His neighbors didn't want to get in trouble for being the ones to introduce him to heroin, so they stayed silent as he spiraled out of control. And even the friend he was getting high with when he OD'd didn't stick around after they called 911. We hear the story of a life-changed and life-changing community. But what about the failed community? Today in our scripture story, a Samaritan, a foreigner, is traveling along and finds a man beaten on the side of the road and helps him. The Samaritan takes the man to an inn and asks the innkeeper to help him, to care for him. The Samaritan saves a man's life, and we call him good. And he was. But why was the act of compassion necessary in the first place? In our story today, we can focus on the power of good deeds. We can focus on the hypocrisy of those who passed by without helping. But we should never forget one of the fundamental questions of this text. Why did it happen? Why did it happen? Why did the bandits attack him? What led them to hurt someone else? How common was crime on this road? Why did it happen? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once preached on this text and explained in the sermon he was tired of being a good Samaritan. Tired of being a good Samaritan. He wanted to stop bandaging up those he found beside the road. He was tired of bandaging people up. He wanted to fix the problem of crime on the road. Fix the problem of crime on the road. Church, I don't know about you, but I am tired of being in rescue and response mode. Tired of being in response mode to the disasters around us. Another victim, more thoughts and prayers. Another victim, more collections and donations. Another victim, another failing of community. Those who are hurting are not evil. Those who are hurting others are not the devil's tools. They are our failings. They are our failings as a church and as a broader community. We didn't love them enough, at least not enough to fix the road. We may have loved them, but not enough to be honest with them about our concerns. Not enough to tell their families about the problems we see. Not enough to change our lifestyle to protect their future. We did not love them enough to do what we could to fix the road. After the shootings in Florida, I heard lots of voices for change, but too many of those voices went silent when they were asked to sacrifice something to change someone else's future. After the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, which seems so far away today, I heard lots of voices of solidarity, but those voices became strangely silent when it called someone to change their opinion, change their perspective, to change their heart. As much as we would like to do it alone, there are real world problems that none of us can face by ourselves. There are lots of real-world problems that none of us can solve alone. As much as we glorify the narrative of the Lone Ranger hero, the person who comes in, the knight on the white horse, the one who comes to rescue, we know it's not real. None of us can face these problems alone. We have real problems in our world, and none of us can face them alone. As much as our culture focuses on individual rights, our future is found in each other. Our very humanity is defined by our relationships, not our ability to be the lone savior. We need each other. We need each other. In our first week of Lent, we talked about the individual journey that each of us must choose. We talked about how Lent is not something that we're all sucked into, but each of us must choose the journey. Last week we reflected on the fact that we're not the only ones on a journey, that often you and I are both on a journey. There are others around us all entering this journey, but we're each on our own path. Today our story reminds us that while we're each on our own path, we have partners along the way. For different legs of our journey, God will put different people in our lives. We may be surprised at who comes into our path, who comes alongside us to accompany us, who asks us to take a detour and walk with them for a while. We each have our destination, but in this church, we share this portion of the journey together. In our lives, we each have a destination, but we will choose companions on that journey, people to support us along the way. In this lifetime, we will each have our own destination, but we can't get there alone. We cannot get there by ourselves. We need direction, we need support, we need guidance from a community around us, mentors, accompanists along the way. They don't do it for us, they help us along our journey. We do it together. When we listen on Sundays to Miriam playing piano, when we come in and she's playing the prelude, she can cut loose. She can do what she wants. But when we're singing hymns, Miriam shifts her style a little bit to accompany us, to empower our singing. There's a difference between a performer and a song leader. One who's on stage and one who is setting the stage for others. We all need people to accompany us along the way. I spent this last week in Nashville with an ecumenical group that plans camp curriculum for our mainline denominations: Methodists, Presbyterians, Church of the Brethren, Disciples of Christ, UCC, and Episcopalians, all at a table together. And we were reviewing the things we know to be true as we laid the foundations of the curriculum. The fact that we all need each other and that our campers bring gifts to that community. That we needed to write something that allowed each kid to bring their voice in. And also for their leaders to accompany them. Not tell them how to live their lives, not tell them how to do it, but accompany them. Come alongside them. We need each other on this journey. Even the Samaritan didn't do it all alone. He couldn't do it alone. He helps the man on the side of the road and then takes him to an inn. He hands the baton to an innkeeper who then takes over care. And I'm sure that innkeeper couldn't give 24/7 care and also keep up with his inn. He probably had folks who worked with him, family that he called on to help care for this man's needs. None of us can do it alone. We all need help. We all need love. And when we fail to help others, when we fail to love others, we fail to be the community of care and compassion that God calls us to be. And we can see the results. We can see the results in very tragic ways all around us. When we fail to help people face their problems, when we fail to help veterans return to society, when we fail to help women face abuse and neglect and discrimination, when we fail to address racism in our society, within our culture, when we fail to confront homophobia and the ways it sneaks into our language, into our culture, and in our hearts, when we fail to heal the hurts of our neighbors, when we fail to be the community God calls us to be, we trust that God will forgive. We trust that God will have grace for us. And it's true. God continues to have grace for us even in our failings. But why should God always have to? When we could have sacrificed for each other. When we can start loving our neighbor. Start loving our neighbor and holding ourselves accountable. When we could fix the road. Why should we have to keep leaning on God's grace for our failure as a community when we are so capable of joining together and being the community God empowers us to be? And when we feel like we can't do it, when we feel like the task is too much, maybe the problem is us trying to go it alone. Maybe there's someone we're missing. Someone's gifts that have yet to be added to the mix. Someone who feels like they've been left on the side of the road, just waiting on the church to call them into service. Waiting on a community to surround them and love them for who they are. When we live as community, the community grows. When we serve as community, the community serves itself and those who did not know how alone they were. God will forgive us when we fail, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. So on this Lenten journey, who needs rescuing? As we travel this Lenten journey, who needs rescuing? But more important, what roads must be changed? Amen.